Prologue Part 4, let's call her Kakra, or Avalu. That one. A name becomes a battleground for identity in a land that rejects her. They didn't want to name me. Not properly. Not with ceremony. Not with joy. In our village, particularly for those of our caste, a child often lingered nameless for days, sometimes weeks, a mere kana or papa until the stars aligned or the priest deigned to consult his ancient texts. But for a girl born under an eclipse, a Dalit child, the delay wasn't about auspicious timings, it was about outright reluctance. In our sun-baked hamlet, the Namakaranam, the sacred naming ceremony, known locally as Paridal in Tamil regions or Namakara in Kannada, was a grand affair for boys. This significant ritual typically takes place on the 11th or 16th day after a child's birth, though some traditions extend it to the 3rd month or even the 1st year. Until this ceremony, it was common for a baby to be referred to by generic, affectionate terms like Kanna, darling, or Papa, baby. The belief was that the name, chosen auspiciously, officially introduced the child to the family and the world. For boys, banana leaves, laden with offerings, would line the courtyard. Sandalwood paste would adorn foreheads, and the temple bell would peal, a joyful echo announcing a new life, a new heir. For girls, it was a quieter affair, often rushed, sometimes forgotten, a mere formality whispered into existence. For me, it became a public spectacle of rejection, a ritual twisted into a weapon of humiliation. I was born during an eclipse. The village elders saw it as an ill omen, a stain on the sky mirrored in my very being. I hadn't cried upon entering the world, a silence interpreted not as peace, but as a deeper curse. I was a girl. And I was Dalit. 3 strikes against me before my first breath. The priest arrived late for what should have been my naming day, his pristine dhoti a stark contrast to the dust of our home, his forehead marked with the sacred ash that granted him authority. He didn't look at me, cradled loosely in Amma's arms. His gaze swept over our mud walls, a silent condemnation. "Where is the offering?" he demanded, his voice a dry rasp, skipping the customary greetings. Amma, her own face etched with exhaustion from childbirth and the relentless village gossip, offered a small brass plate, a few betel leaves, a meager scattering of coins she'd saved, and a pinch of turmeric. His eyes, cold and dismissive, narrowed. "No coconut? No silk cloth? Is this all a new life is worth in this house?" Appa, his spirit already broken by the arrival of a second daughter when he yearned for a son, simply shrugged, his gaze fixed on the ground. "She's just a girl. What more is needed?" The words were like a stone dropped into a quiet well, creating ripples of shame that washed over Amma and, somehow, over me, even as a newborn. The priest sighed, a sound heavy with disdain. "Fine. Let's get this over with." He settled cross-legged on our swept earth floor, a small lamp sputtering beside him. His chanting began, flat and mechanical, devoid of the usual reverence. He didn't consult my birth chart, didn't utter a single prayer for my future. It was a perfunctory act, a mere task to be completed. "What name?" he finally asked, his eyes still averted from me, already dismissing my existence. Appa, desperate to appease, murmured, "Let her be called Lakshmi. Perhaps she'll bring wealth, despite everything." The irony was a bitter taste in the air, a goddess of fortune for a child deemed unfortunate. The priest paused, a sneer twisting his lips. "Lakshmi is not for girls like her." His words, laced with venom, struck Amma like a physical blow. "Why not?" Amma's voice was a barely audible whisper, a flicker of defiance igniting in her tired eyes. "She was born during an eclipse," he spat, as if recounting a grave sin. "She's low-born. Naming her after a goddess is an insult to the divine, an affront to the temple itself." Appa, defeated, simply nodded. "Then choose something simple." "Anything." The priest pondered, his gaze still avoiding me, as if I were an unclean thing. "Kalli," he declared. "It's common. Undemanding. Easy to forget, unless you tread on it." Kalli, thorn. Alma's face, pale moments before, tightened, her jaw clenching. "No." The word, though soft, cut through the air like a knife. The priest looked up, genuinely surprised by her audacity. "What did you say?" "She will be called Tulsi," Amma reiterated, her voice gaining a quiet strength, a force born of deep, maternal love. The hut fell silent, the flickering lamp casting dancing shadows on the mud walls, mimicking the turmoil in the room. The priest scoffed, a harsh, derisive sound. "Tulsi? That's a sacred plant, used in Brahmin rituals. You want to name her after something holy?" His tone dripped with contempt, his eyes drilling into Amma, challenging her insolence. Amma, her gaze unwavering, met his. "Tulsi survives drought, fire, neglect. It grows even in broken soil. It purifies." Her words were not just about the plant, they were a prophecy, a declaration for the life she envisioned for her daughter. The priest's lips curled in disgust. "It's not in the scriptures for the likes of you." From the edge of the small gathering, the landlord's wife, a woman whose silk sari gleamed even in the dim light of our hut, stepped forward, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "If not Lakshmi, and not even a simple name, then perhaps something more, fitting for an eclipse child?" She paused, letting her gaze sweep over me, then Amma. "Kakra? Or in our tongue, Kapai? Kasa? It is honest, at least." Her words hung in the air, blunt and brutal, intended to wound far deeper than any physical blow. A single, tense breath filled the air, held collectively by hundreds of spectators who were going about their business at the temple. That moment, a public humiliation masked by religious decree, sealed my fate. It was no longer just about a name, it was about the very right to exist with dignity. The hundreds of villagers, previously focused on their temple rituals, now paused, their silent judgment a heavy shroud. Each person who heard those words, who saw Amma's plea dismissed, became a witness to my unnaming. The air thrummed with a collective, unspoken agreement that I was indeed Kalli, a thing to be trodden upon, a name easily forgotten. Appa, caught between his wife's unexpected defiance and the priest's wrath, spat into the corner, a gesture of frustration and resignation. Let her be Kalli. Why argue with him? It only brings more shame. But Amma didn't back down. She stood, her hands trembling, and walked to the doorway. As if on cue, outside, the temple bell rang, once, clear and sharp, echoing through the village. She turned back, her eyes shining with a fierce, quiet resolve. The gods have heard, she declared, her voice resonating with an unshakable conviction. Her name is Tulsi. The priest, his face contorted with anger and affront, refused to complete even the rudimentary ritual. He gathered his meager belongings, muttering curses under his breath, and left our hut without a backward glance, without blessing me. Appa didn't stop him. He just shook his head, muttering, "Stubborn woman," before retreating into the oppressive silence of his own disappointment and heading out to seek solace in drink. That night, under the cloak of a moonless sky, Amma performed her own private Namakaranam. She wrote my name, Tulsi, on a fresh mango leaf she had picked, tracing the letters with her finger. She placed it carefully under my cradle, the one now relegated to the cowshed. She lit a single oil lamp, its tiny flame a beacon in the oppressive darkness, and whispered, her voice a balm against the day's wounds, "You are not Kalli. You are Tulsi. My holy basil. You will grow." But the village, steeped in tradition and prejudice, refused to accept it. The battle for my name, my very identity, had just begun. Amma's quiet war for my name waged on, a silent battle fought in every glance, every hushed word. Years blurred, marked not by birthdays or festivals, but by the relentless chipping away at her resolve. The village, a chorus of dismissive whispers, clung to Kalli. "How is Kalli doing?" the shopkeeper would ask, handing Amma a small pouch of spices. "Tell Kalli to come help with the harvest," a neighbor would call across the fields. Each time, Amma would correct them, her voice soft but unwavering, "Her name is Tulsi." "Why does it matter so much, Amma?" I'd ask, my child's voice laced with the weariness of constant correction. I was 7, then 8, then 10, and the dichotomy of my two names felt like two different skins I was forced to wear. At home, I was Tulsi, cherished and sacred. Outside, I was Kalli, a label slapped onto me, signifying my unimportance, my prickly nature. "It matters because you are Tulsi," she'd say, her fingers braiding my hair, each strand a reaffirmation. It is the name of strength, of life. But the world outside our hut saw it differently. When I dared to correct the school teacher, a stern woman with a gaze as sharp as a broken slate, she rapped her ruler on the desk. "Kalli, do not be insolent. Your mother fills your head with grand ideas." The other girls snickered, their eyes mirroring the teacher's judgment. It was a humiliation that burned, a reminder that my mother's quiet rebellion had consequences for me. One searing afternoon, when the sun beat down like a blacksmith's hammer, I was sent to fetch water from the communal well. The landlord's daughter, Radha, a girl only a year older but with the entitlement of generations, was already there with her friends. As I approached, her laughter, usually tinkling like the anklets of a dancer, turned sharp. "Look, it's Kalli," she sneered, pointing. Her friends giggled, echoing the name. "Don't you know better than to use a goddess's name, low-caste girl, when you're nothing but a thorn?" A rush of heat flooded my cheeks. My hands, calloused from helping Amma, clenched around the empty water pot. "My name is Tulsi," I managed, my voice a shaky whisper. Radha stepped closer, her silk skirt brushing against my coarse cotton. "Oh, it is it? Well, your father calls you Avalu or that one. Even he knows better than to taint a sacred name with your presence." She laughed, a cruel, piercing sound. "How cute," one of Radha's friends intervened. "Yes, her appa keeps referring to her as Avalu, whenever chores need to be done or when he asks her to get that bottle of alcohol." Radha stepped in and said, "We shall now also call her Avalu. That is a much more suitable name than Kalli for her." Henceforth, Tulsi was called Avalu by her father and by children in school. She was named Kalli by authorities in all her papers and also at the temple, and villagers used as her priest-given name of Kalli or Avalu, and Tulsi was only called this name by her mother, her grandmother, her sisters and herself. Younger children in the village, especially those of the same caste, would call her Akka, a respect word for sister or cousin sister or elderly girl, and younger children of the higher caste called her simply Avalu or Avalu Akka. Her words, sharp as shards of glass, pierced me deeper than any stick poke to my cradle. Appa. He never called me Tulsi. The realization, though present for years, suddenly hit with the force of a physical blow. Why? Why did even my own father refuse my name? Why did he side with the very people who sought to diminish me? That night, the question gnawed at me. As Amma kneaded dough for rotis, her hands moving with practiced rhythm, I finally blurted it out. "Amma, why does Appa call me girl or that one? Why won't he say Tulsi?" Her hands stilled. The scent of wheat flour and wood smoke filled the silence. She looked at the dying embers in the hearth, her face etched with a pain I was too young to fully comprehend. "Your father, he carries burdens, Tulsi," she said, her voice barely audible. "Burdens of what the village expects, burdens of what he believes a man's honor demands." "But Ravi," I started, thinking of my brother, whose every name was spoken with pride. "Ravi is a son. You're different." She didn't elaborate, but her eyes held a story of their own, a story of a mother fighting for her daughter's very identity against a tide of tradition and fear. The next market day brought a new wave of veiled jabs. Amma took me with her to sell the small bundles of herbs she had gathered. As we sat on our worn mat, a merchant from the upper caste, his eyes scanning us with disdain, bought a handful of mint. "And how is little Kalli?" he asked Amma, his voice dripping with condescension, as he tossed a few meager coins onto our mat. Before Amma could speak, a woman, her face heavily veiled, paused near our stall. She was new to the village, a recent bride from a distant district. She had a kind face, and her eyes, though partially hidden, held an unusual spark of defiance. She looked at the merchant, then at me, then at Amma. "Kalli," she questioned, her voice soft but clear. I heard this child's name is Tulsi. A beautiful name, sacred and resilient. The merchant's head snapped up. His eyes narrowed at the veiled woman, then at Amma, then at me, as if searching for a hidden conspiracy. A hush fell over the small section of the market. Amma's eyes met the veiled woman's, and for a fleeting moment, a silent understanding passed between them, a flicker of recognition, a shared courage. The merchant, flustered, quickly muttered, "Ah, yes, Tulsi." My mistake, and moved away, his customary swagger deflated. The veiled woman offered a small, almost imperceptible nod to Amma, then to me, before continuing on her way, leaving a ripple of whispers in her wake. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental, a tiny crack in the formidable wall of village opinion. This encounter, however, was a double-edged sword. While it gave Amma renewed resolve, it also amplified the underlying tension. The village elders began to eye us with suspicion. Amma's insistence on my name was no longer just stubbornness, it was becoming an act of defiance, shaking the rigid caste hierarchy. They saw it as an attempt to rise above our station, to claim a status that wasn't ours. Whispers of Amma's pride and Tulsi's arrogance followed us like shadows. One evening, a group of men, led by the priest's son, stopped Appa on his way back from the fields. I watched from the shadows of our hut, my heart pounding. Their voices were low and menacing. I couldn't hear the exact words, but I saw the priest's son jab a finger towards our hut, then towards Appa's chest. Appa stood there, his shoulders slumped, his head bowed. When he finally returned, his face was grim. "You must stop," he told Amma, his voice a low growl. "This name, it causes trouble. They say it is an affront to the gods. They say you are putting a target on our family." His eyes, usually clouded with resignation, now held a flicker of genuine fear. Amma looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "My daughter's name is her birthright. It is all I can give her." "And what about our rice?" "Our livelihood," he countered, his voice rising. "Do you think they will let us farm their land if we disrespect them?" A chilling thought struck me then, a twist of fear I hadn't known before. Was our very survival tied to this name? Was Amma, in her courageous act of naming me Tulsi, unknowingly jeopardizing our meager existence? The tension in our small hut was palpable, thick with unspoken threats. But even then, Amma did not yield. Her defiance, quiet and persistent as the root of the banyan tree, anchored me. I learned that a name was more than just sounds, it was an identity, a shield, a promise. And my mother, the architect of that shield, was preparing me for a fight I was yet to fully understand. The villagers might call me Kalli, and Appa might avoid my name, but Amma's steadfast Tulsi was a drumbeat in my soul, a rhythm that slowly, irrevocably, began to drown out the world's dissenting whispers. The battle for my name was far from over. It was just beginning, and with each passing year, its stakes grew higher, more entwined with the very fabric of our lives.